Neil, say hi.
Good morning.
Live feed. So I'm just gonna introduce everyone to. Hi guys. Andy Carey, say hi to live feed.
Hello.
Everybody watching, guys. I hope
Hello.
so.
Hi.
Hi guys. Christina, live feed.
Hello. It's a good start of the event. That's all I can say.
It's a bit constrained, isn't it?
Do you want to move around? Because you have the thing.
Yeah. Like an idiot, I forgot to print off my notes.
I can.
Yeah, because
What's that, guys?
di sostenersi.
Yeah, almost. Hi Lou, I got your Twitter here. Hope you enjoyed.
Come on.
Yeah, I see it tweeting it here. We're about to start now, so please take your seats. Thank you. Mic check, mic check. Hello, guys. Hope you're enjoying your weekend so far. My name is Wrench, and I'm the president of the Enterprise Society. And the Tiny Conference is our flagship event, and we're going to do it yearly. This is the first time we're doing it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to thank people who made this happen, our wonderful staff, people who work for us, for Enterprise Society. They don't have any incentives, monetary incentives, but they provide their time and their resources. So thank you, Kaisa, Olga, and Tiwani. Also, I would like to thank our sponsors, Anglo-Ruskin University, Marcia Baldry, Gary Peckham. Also, I'd like to thank Alex there from Startup Lab, helping us a lot. So he provides the headquarters, and you guys definitely need to check it out. Thank you, Christina from Cedar. And thank you for our speakers for tonight, so agreeing to come and giving us your time. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Carrie. She's an entrepreneur and founder of 50 Generations. And yeah, thank you.
Happy Saturday, everybody. Let's start with a belief that I hold. The way we run businesses does not serve us as humans. My name's Carrie. I'm 35. When I was 25, I started a company that grew and grew and took me to the brink and back. Now I'm an entrepreneur and an investor, and I'm crafting and testing a new model for business, one that does serve us as humans. And I invest in and coach purpose-led businesses in my incubator, accelerator, called 50th Generation. Now, for 1 year, I asked everybody I met to answer a question about their relationship with businesses. I asked them to think about the one they worked for, the ones they bought from. And I asked them this question: in general, who wins? How do you think those conversations went? So here's what I learned. Most people are in negative emotional equity at work, and they feel they lose more than they gain in energy and self-esteem and confidence and goodwill. Because companies are about control and process, not about people. And most of the people I spoke to, even those in good jobs with good companies, felt in general underthanked and a bit overblamed. And the financial reward just wasn't enough. And what about people who were customers of businesses? What did they say to that question? In general, who wins? And mostly the human beings I asked, who are buying things for themselves, for their families, for their businesses, had a similar story, that in general that transaction was unsatisfying. It was rare that they felt they'd really won in a relationship with a business. So what about the people who are leading and owning all these companies? Well, do you think they'd got it all? All that control and all that power and all that money and all that winning, because presumably they're the ones that are winning? And actually, no. Most of the business owners I spoke to felt trapped in the business and unable to get to the freedom and purpose that they hoped they would find when they started the company. And most leaders of corporates, senior people in big companies, felt an ongoing sense of stress and anxiety, and they longed to spend more time with their family. And what about us as citizens of the world? So this is a question for all of you right now. Do we win in our relationships with businesses? So is business, with its wealth of resources and talent, are most businesses spending most of their time solving a human problem, making something better for humans? Are humans winning? So who does win? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. And I don't find many human beings at the centre of this, gaining huge satisfaction one way or another from business. Can't find many real people who are deriving huge joy and satisfaction and long-term, lifelong meaning from business. There are some, not many. And we accept this no winning because we all believe deep down that businesses are there to make money and that truly serving humans doesn't pay the bills. And we feel that the world's problems should be solved by government, by not-for-profit, by charity. And for as long as most people believe that, that will continue to be true. Because conventional wisdom says it's or. Make money or do good. And the world is changing. When Michael Porter, one of the most respected business strategy thinkers, and some people would say a very traditional business strategy thinker, said this on the main TED stage last March, I knew we were onto something. So he said, if we try and solve the world's problems through grants, through donations, we won't even scratch the surface. We need to put valuable products, real business, paying customers at the heart of creating these solutions. Then we can create enough scale to do good. And that's what customers want. We are increasingly willing to pay for products and services that in some way make human life better. Interestingly, that's what angel investors want. So let's put venture capitalists aside for the moment. I had a conversation with an angel fund manager in Texas yesterday, and he said this. He said the majority of angel investment money is sitting on the sidelines, waiting to invest in something with purpose. Today's angel investor wants to participate in a business that matters. And do you know what? I am utterly convinced that there is a new model for private business, that there is an and option. Money, make money and do good. More than that, see doing good as the source of future value and profit. And in this room alone, many of you are already reaching for this new model of business. And it's like we're all kind of feeling for a different part of the same elephant. But we have a different language, we have different experiences, we have a different worldview, we have different styles. And we've probably come at this from a different place, from a different point of need of our own. That's why we're usually doing things like this. It meets a need that we have ourselves. But you know what? I think we're heading for the same destination. And we need each other. So if we're clear about the problem, should we make some progress on the answer? I want to first of all just dig into what goes on in our brains. What is chemically driving us towards the old way of doing business that doesn't serve us as humans? Because once we understand that, we can start to change the world. So here's my diagnosis. We are humans. We are driven by love and fear. And the old prehistoric part of our brain, and I sometimes call this, like other people, the reptile brain, it sees danger and it wants to keep us safe by making us act, do something quickly. And under pressure, that part of our brain is activated. And it's designed to get our attention fast, so that we respond fast to make the feeling go away. And the thing is, at work, there's a lot of pressure. We operate in that fear, fight, flight mode quite a lot of the time. Why? We're evolved that way. The people who said, "A tiger, quick, run away," they lived a little bit longer than the people who said, "Oh, a lovely fluffy tiger, let me pat you on the nose." They passed on those genes. In the old days, the threat was a tiger. Nowadays, that's not so common. But the threat is identity. We're tribal. Who am I? Who am I in the minds of others? Business is a game for identity. And fear demands that we control ourselves, our businesses, the world. And it makes us see the world through blinkers. It makes us see the world as win or lose, because the resources are scarce. And this can get out of hand. So taken to its furthest extent, this is the what's behind extreme anxiety, eating disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders. It's the reptile brain going mad, seeing danger everywhere, trying to control it. And on a much milder level, we're making decisions from our reptile brain thousands of times every week. We think of it as normal. We think it's just what work is like. That's work. It's business. So what does a new way look like? Now, I think there are two ways in which we can do this in business. The first way is what the business does, the content of the business. There are many businesses here today where their sole purpose, their product, does something powerful for a human being. The other way is how we run that business, the way we treat employees, how we interact with suppliers, how we move around the world, how we interact in our ecosystem. And that is just as important in creating a place that builds up human beings, the ones that work there, and that sets a positive template for human behavior in the world. And why? Some of you will have heard me say this before, but work is where we spend our time, and it is one of the places we learn about how the world works. Every business is a social business. So, if you wanted to start a purpose-led business, or you wanted to change a current business into a purpose-led new paradigm business, what would you do? Now, I can only talk about the companies I run and invest in. So here's what we do. And the first thing is, it isn't a technique or a model. There isn't a book and a manual or a script for changing this. It is a mindset. And I don't know about you, but the only mind I seem to have any kind of control over is my own. So I start with myself. I learnt to spot the reptile brain taking over. So remember, the reptile brain tells us the world is dangerous and that other people and other things are threats and that I need to fight to win everything. I need to win the money and the resources and the recognition and the space and the territory. And it says that I should locate blame in other people so I'm okay. Now, I am socially skilled, so I can do all these things quite subtly. And often we serve up our fear response in quite a nice package. And people hardly know it's there, but it is. So I've learned to be really disciplined about spotting that as much of the time as I can. So what I do is I spot the energy rising. You know, when you get that email and you read it in the middle of a meeting and suddenly you are straight into your inbox and the heat's risen and how could they say that? And I can't believe they even thought of that. And that's just one example of where we get that kind of hot spot and we respond in a way that creates a business that doesn't serve humans. It's those decisions that lead us to create this culture that doesn't serve humans. And I say, okay, I've clocked it, and I understand why I have that response, but I can choose to operate differently. And I ask myself, what do I want really in this situation? And we teach businesses in 50th generation to know the hotspots. And typically it's when some of these things are kicking around. Money, recognition for something that went well, blame for something that didn't, control of a project or a resource, and they know to pay extra attention in those situations and make good choices. The other thing I choose to believe at work, in how I run every business or work with businesses that I invest in or just work with, is that every single one of us is making the best choice they can from the list of choices they perceive to be available to them. Nothing seems quite as threatening when I see the world that way. Once I've taken charge of my reptile brain, then a world of possibilities opens up. Then I can start running a business. And I get really clear on my vision. Vision is a word many people bandy around. So let's clarify it as this. What is my real intention for this company? Why is it on the planet? The same angel investment fund manager yesterday gave me a gift of a question to ask myself and ask other businesses. And I want you to ask yourself it now. Who will care if I succeed? Answer that, and you understand your vision and your audience. Every purpose-led business is trying to mitigate a negative emotion for a human and create a positive emotion for a human. And making that emotional travel as far-reaching as possible, that's your goal. Defining that is your goal. And I sum that up in an intent, and I write that in as few words as possible, and I write it on the top of everything. I have it at the top of my to-do list. I have it on every document that's to do with that company. So for 50th generation, it is to build a template for business that serves humans. For One Fish, Two Fish, which was my main business, it's communicate things simply for people that matter. And we get the values clear at this stage as well. So every company that I'm a majority shareholder in has these values: open, brave, self-responsible. And a value is only a value if it costs you something. You know that. Now, my values cost me in the short term, and they are hugely rewarding in the long term. My value set in my companies means that everybody, including me, has to say if there's a problem between two people. I don't get to ignore it. Although my colleague in the incubator, Harry Hellier, he always advises that everybody should have an evening a week off values, should take an evening off their values, perhaps go to the pub and do that. It's quite a good recommendation. But we have long-term relationships that last because we're clean, because we say what we think, and we don't not say things because we're worried about what the other person would think or worried about whether they will cope with that. We assume if we say things with a positive intent, with an intent to build a long-term relationship, that they are responsible for their response to that. It's quite a different way of thinking. And projects and things move fast. If I think about what we've accomplished in this range of businesses in the last 18 months, things move fast because we're not stuck in the glue of the thing we never say, which is really what slows most businesses and most teams down. And once we've done that, then we really have to quickly tackle the real world issue that we have to run all these businesses at the highest level of sophistication, because we need to make customers really happy. We need to create a scalable revenue stream, and we've got to make a profit. If we not only can't survive, but we can't grow and we can't scale and we can't create more impact. So I am constantly hunting down the best way to run companies. So right now, that's things like lean startup, design-led thinking, the Sherlaw's methodology for optimizing the revenue chain. I'm always hunting those down and tracking them down. And Barnaby Lashbrook, who's the CEO of the fantastic mini global company called Time Etc., a great profit-making, purpose-led company, if I ever saw one, he says this. He says, after 5 years, we finally admitted that having a brilliant vision, being nice people, was nowhere near enough. We were making customers happy, but we were making ourselves miserable and we were making no money. So we decided to run our purpose-led business like the lean, mean, profit-making machine that it deserved to be. We kept the customer focus. We added in lean business process. Now we're in 8 countries and growing fast. When I first started my business 10 years ago, that mindset didn't even really exist on my radar. So there were businesses that made money and there were businesses that did good things. And they were kind of not-for-profits. That's what I called them. And I surrounded those with loads of beliefs. That's what we all believed at the time. So if you worked for a not-for-profit, you had to take the smallest salary that you could tolerate. That was the right thing to do. The products that a not-for-profit would offer would be inferior to those of competitors, but you trade off quality because they were doing something good. And not-for-profits would be run on a shoestring. They would not invest. They didn't need an employee development program or new technology because everybody would work really, really, really hard on poor technology because they believed in the cause. Now I know better. I understand how to claim full value. A few weeks ago, I was at the Social Incubator East Startup Weekend on the judging panel, and all these fantastic social entrepreneurs pitching to get onto the accelerator. And of the 8 I saw, they all had exactly the same market positioning. We do all these amazing things, and we charge a little bit less than the next competitor. I could hardly believe it, even though they had a premium product and they were doing something good for the world as well. They should be charging the highest price in the market. So can you imagine what I said to them? My message to every company I invest in or run is exactly the same. Understand and claim the full commercial value of what you do. That doesn't mean charging the highest price. There are many ways to claim full value, but start by knowing and believing the full value. Purpose-led businesses will remain small for as long as our pricing tells the market that our products are not as good as our competitors or that we're not serious. And it's the reptile brain that would have us believe that purpose-led business is worth less. The final thing we do to create scalable purpose-led business is we are big believers in data. We know how to create and collect and use good data. All companies say they want feedback. They don't. They want their customers to validate the thing they believe themselves. They're seeking approval. And what is Twitter, if not one enormous approval generation machine? So my reptile brain tells me that feedback is good or bad, and that it's either a threat or it's a validation of me personally, but I choose to park that and I see feedback as neutral data. All the companies in the 50th generation incubator learned really early on that data's everything. So we assume when we start our business, we're stupid. And our first job is to get less stupid as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible. And the only way to do that is get out of the building and collect data. So if you've ever seen a 50th generation person at the station or at a bus stop, they're probably collecting data. What we have to do is release our emotional attachment to data. That's our reptile brain at work, again, trying to keep us safe. So many companies launch products even if they don't test well, because they've invested so much in creating it, or it's a director's pet project, or, well, the feedback that we did, the panel program we did wasn't done quite well enough. We seek out what validates our opinion. Or we have this brilliant product idea and we do loads of customer interviews saying, hey, would you buy this product? And they say, do you know what? I probably would, now you ask. And then they don't, they lie. And what we should be asking is, what is the problem that you have? What is that costing you? How are you currently trying to solve that problem and get around that need? And we are wedded or welded to our solution. And that has no place in any of my companies. So we see data as neutral facts. And if I've spent £100,000 on building a product, I don't want to spend £5,000 promoting it, a further £5,000 promoting it if it's not going to sell. And I don't mind if that makes me wrong. And I don't mind if that makes me look foolish. And this is particularly important in a purpose-led business where we are so passionately committed to the thing. And often that thing comes from a need that we have, an experience that we've had. And we truly believe the world needs it. And we look for data that supports that. We want the market to support it. We don't listen when the data says no. But do you know what? Every time the data says no, it also says, how about trying over here? And that's where the gold mine is. So this is just how we do it, how we see the world. You will have your own ways, and you'll hear more ways today. Take what is useful, discard what isn't, but know this. If you want to make a difference in the world, profitable, purposeful business is the way to do it. That's what creates the scale and the sustainability to solve real problems and change real things for good. So I wish you well, and please keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, for this. This is amazing talk about the social enterprise, and I think she actually gave this general view: what is social enterprise and what are we aiming at. Also, I want to apologize that we've streaming live, and there's a little bit issue going on. So if I run here around and do some stuff, please don't worry. Next up is Neil Stott. He's Executive Director of the Center for Social Innovation, Director of Masters in Social Innovation Program at Cambridge Judge Business School. Please give a round of applause for Neil Stott. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. That's me. Until Monday, I was also Chief Executive of Keystone Development Trust. Most of my career has been spent in charities like MenCap and Dr. Barnardo's. 13 years at Cambridge City Council in youth and community work, Canterbury, and then 12 years building a cluster of social enterprises and property out in Norfolk. But I now transitioned full-time to the business school. So I'm a bit of a pretend academic, if you like. I'm going to talk to you today about some ideas that we have about the future, which is partly about social enterprise, but we're using the term social ventures, and you'll see why. I'll start off by saying we may not be right, these ideas that are forming, but what I am seeing amongst the students I work with, the judge, and also I'm sure at Anglia, where I think I'm a visiting fellow as well with Andy, is this real zeitgeist, this real feeling that people want to make a change in the world. Just for interest, undergraduates, how many undergraduates in the room? Okay, postgraduates, and how many from the business school? Everybody? Most people, some not. That's good, that's good. Because in our work, increasingly, a lot of the students who are coming to see us are engineers and other forms of scientists who want to make a difference in the world, which is good. So, the problem, which Carrie started to touch upon. How do you create a business which is nice to people, kind to the planet, and makes a profit at the same time? Well, as I found out in the last 12 years, it's not that easy, especially if you're working like I have been doing in a poor place with market and public failure. It's a tough ask, especially when your customers and your beneficiaries do not have a lot of money. Before I get to that, though, I want to touch on why would you want to? Why would you want to be nice to people, kind to the planet, etc., etc.? So for some people, it's slaying the dragons. It could be slaying the dragons of the corporates. It could be slaying the dragon of climate change. It doesn't matter. Some people's motivations are the big picture stuff. Oops. Other people's motivations, I think this is my career really, this is Don Quixote, who spent his latter years pretending he was a knight and tilting at dragons, which actually were windmills. Some of us have spent a lot of our career, chasing windmills. So there's two key different sorts of motivation that drives people. One is extrinsic, okay? And that's external factors. One key driver for some is hard cash. One motivation for others is status. And one is what other people think of you. And I think Carrie touched on this. This is the old stuff. This is what motivates some people. Intrinsic motivation is what lies within you. And it's your own values. It's values that's from your childhood or your faith or whatever it may be. It's the values that drive you as a human being. And intrinsic motivation, this passion, this will to make change, this will to make a difference in the world, is what underpins resilience to cope with any frustrations, setbacks, and the feeling that you're never doing enough. For those of you who have been involved in what Carrie called not-for-profits, I call not-for-private profit, because it's 100% for profit, it's just how you use it. For those who've been working in community work or whatever, you always feel you're never doing enough for your beneficiaries. Always. And that's it. So, I like the term embodied leadership. And this is about a combination of your values, anger at social injustice. I mean, that's what's driven me for 25 years of my career. A boiling anger within that things need to change. And most importantly, the will to make a difference, the will to make changes, not just in your own lives, but help other people to make changes as well. And embodied leaders are often dissatisfied with existing practices and often wish to change, disrupt, and innovate. It's not unique to social organizations, wouldn't be so, wouldn't say that, but it is crucial in sustaining them, in particularly trying to balance what people call the triple bottom line of, making money, making a profit, being sustainable, etc., etc. So you have to have this resilience. Something has to be within you to want to do it. And I will give 10 brownie points to anyone who can name this film, where this came from. Never Give Up, Never Surrender. Anyone know it? No? Galaxy Quest, great film. It's a spoof on Star Trek. And this is what I say to audiences, particularly of social entrepreneurs. We are often in great danger of believing our own rhetoric. So there's a balance. You have values, you have passion, you want to make a change, you're developing good ideas, etc. But one mustn't delude ourselves that we're always doing good. We need to be very, very conscious that sometimes even social entrepreneurs, social ventures can also have unintended consequences in the world. And some very good papers on this, especially around NGOs involved in trying to change practices in India around football manufacture, basically, and the consequences of taking, the work out of the home to stop children working on it and putting it into factories had all sorts of other consequences which disrupted people's lives, communities, and actually made the situation worse for the children. So even doing good, you can have unintended consequences which you need to pay attention to. So, moving on slightly. This is how many see the world, including most business schools. So you have, at the moment, in the private sector drives innovation, it drives change, it delivers many of our products and services. You have the poor public sector, much maligned, much beaten up. I've worked in it for 16 years and watched it get harder and harder. And you've got the plucky third sector or social sector or voluntary sector, doing what it can, sticking the finger in the dike, stopping, the bandage on society where everyone else has failed. This is how often people see it. And people perceive the public sector as bureaucratic, as slow, as uninnovative. And people sometimes see the third sector as inefficient, as unprofessional, maybe not having the quality. Frankly, I think all of that is complete and utter bollocks. Excuse my language. That's a very simplistic view of the world. Number one, the boundaries between the sectors are becoming blurred as everyone is trying to tackle, not everybody, but a lot of people, the wicked problems in the world, such as climate change, whatever. And everyone wants to be seen as a virtuous organization. Everybody, especially since austerity. I was in a bank a couple of months ago, audience like this, but all investment bankers, etc. And the first question I asked is, who wants to do good in the world? All the hands went up. Who thinks their organization is doing good in the world? All the hands went up. And I'm afraid I said, well, I'm afraid, I've got some bad news, because it isn't. And organizations, sometimes like yours, are doing very bad things in the world and causing a lot of problems. The financial crisis, etc. But the point being, since then, everyone wants to be seen as virtuous. At the business school, we have hundreds of Barclays compliance staff coming through, being trained to be better at compliance issues because they got caught short. So everyone wants to be virtuous. Oops. But sometimes virtuous is skin deep, as I'll come on to. So we see the world slightly different. It is changing, that there's these interconnections. And most importantly, you cannot necessarily do and tackle these issues alone. Sometimes there have to be alliances between public, private, and third sector. Sometimes things have to be done differently. Now, we're working on the idea of social ventures. And for us, a social venture can be any organization, public, private, or third sector, as long as values, mission, governance, and impact are aligned. Now, some of you may have studied a bit about corporate social responsibility, looked at the literature on that, and unfortunately, with some notable exceptions, a lot of it is either a bit of social washing or greenwashing, It doesn't go beyond the surface. It's a nice stuff to make your PR department, look good. It doesn't go very deep. That is not a social organization, social venture, as far as we're concerned. It has to be deeper than that. And social ventures are financially sustainable businesses with two distinguishing features. One is a social motivation, and two is social impact. Simple as that. And there are a number of templates. One classic entrepreneurial template, social enterprise, is the work done by Vision Spring, I think in South America, which is about producing quite high quality glasses and services to people who can't afford them. The disrupted models. The non-profit or not-for-profit templates. Very old. I think Andy may touch on this, so I don't want to steal his thunder too much. But there are many examples throughout history of social ventures, social businesses. Stretching back to medieval times, which is one of my fascinations at the moment, monastic organizations in the West, whatever you think of them, were value-driven and have lasted 900 years, a lot of them. More recent example is the Salvation Army in the 1890s or so. Anyone heard of the Match Girls? The Match Girls? Yeah? Good. The Match Girls were women who, East End of London in particular, who made matches out of phosphorus. And the phosphorus ate away their face, basically, and this thing called phossy jaw. It was very, very unpleasant. Salvation Army created a business which had a number of, it produced a product that worked and was safer. It didn't use phosphorus. It gave reasonable wages, better wages than in the other factories, etc., etc. A good example of a problem and a solution that actually made some money. Not sure what happened to it, need to find out more. And obviously there's an example of the Grauman Bank, which I won't go into too much detail, I haven't got much time. And there are numerous models, I won't go through them all, of different forms of more traditional social enterprise. One is a fee-for-service model, and low-income client as the markets model. This is something that I use in one of my, before I left, we sold recycled bikes. We got bikes from the waste chain, we did them up, and we sold them as cheaply as possible to people who needed transport, etc. What is a fatal flaw with that model, anyone? Any fatal flaws? I think Carrie alluded to it. Sorry? Profit. If you're selling into people who can't afford a lot and you're selling something very cheaply, it's very hard to generate profit. You're doing good, it's very hard to generate profit. And it will not necessarily grow. Or we've tried, but it will not necessarily grow, that particular enterprise. Another one is the employment affirmative model, which is a very, very sort of classic social enterprise model, where basically the target population, whoever it may be, is working with the entity to deliver a product into the marketplace. Can anyone think of an example? There's quite a few folks. Okay, it is Saturday morning, I suppose. Okay, 15. Anyone heard of 15? It's Jamie Oliver's restaurant in London. So it takes young people, tend to be unemployed, and trains them as chefs. And those chefs deliver a service. Or there's a bakery in New York that's takes people who are unemployed or whatever, trains them, and obviously they deliver products into a marketplace. A fantastic model. But can anyone think of a fatal flaw in this one? Nope, okay. So it makes things very expensive. It makes things expensive because you're spending a lot of time training and working with staff who have a lot of additional needs. Okay? It takes a lot of time, and that can make your profit margins extremely challenging. But it's not a good thing to do, it's just hard work. This model that I used when I was at Keystone, which is a subsidization model, or the Robin Hood principle. We deliver products and services to people who can afford it and cross-subsidize our products and services to people who can't. So going back to the bikes, my other businesses, the consultancy, the property, etc., made a profit. We reinvested that into our less than profitable enterprises because they were doing other things. They were recycling bikes, selling bikes more cheaply, and also created 4 jobs. So we balanced our portfolio in that sort of model. So these are all sort of classic models, and there are many more, but time is against me. Now there's also the public model. It's very unfashionable at the moment, very unfashionable. But the public sector must not be discounted. 1, it is the arbitrator of fairness and social justice. 2, you've been exempted. And 3, you've got the National Health Service. But we won't go into that. It is very, very important in all our lives. But it's also very important to entrepreneurs. If you have an Apple phone, the vast majority of the initial technology that went into that was funded through public money. And a lot of the subsequent apps and IT in it, whatever it is, which they've bought or they've taken from startups, was often funded by public money. The public purse underpins quite a lot of entrepreneurship, including our own social incubator East. But more importantly, the public sector does, not necessarily here anymore, creates enterprises, public enterprises across the world. In America, and I was quite surprised about this, there are hundreds and hundreds of public enterprises set up by local states, etc. From billion-dollar companies to quite small ones. And it's all, you'd expect in America to be a fuss about it, it'd be socialism or whatever. It's not really mentioned. People just get on with it. It delivers a service, it makes a profit, and it reinvests in public services. Now that's a model that's lost in this country. What we tend to be doing at the moment is spinning out services into social enterprises, which is a slightly different way. But it is an important model, and I think it'll increase in the future. And there are quite a few, corporates getting involved. Now this is important because some of you may set up a social venture, a social enterprise, but many of you may go into the corporate world. Think, oh, I've lost my soul now. Not necessarily. There's such a thing as social entrepreneurship. Any organization you work for, you can make change, I would suggest. So good examples of corporates creating social ventures. The lady there, basically it's a phone company, and she has a number of phones which she hires out to local people very cheaply so they can make calls when they haven't got access to this, that, and the other. It's very successful. A number of big corporates like Danone, etc., are supporting social ventures through cash and investment, etc. And some are putting their own money into entities. Now, a very good example is, we're not using their water today, but Cooler Aids. Cooler Aids have got many of the, the water thingbobs you'll see around East Anglia. From the day it started by, he was a vicar at the time, a poor vicar, and his wife. And his wife decided to sell bottled water to the middle classes of Cambridge on her bike. From day one, they put a percentage of their profits into a charity. In that case, I think it was, I can't remember, Christian Aid, from day one. It's grown to be a very, very big business and, franchise, etc. They stopped their relationship with Christian Aid and set up their own charitable entity in Malawi, and they invest £3 to £4 million of their profit into that entity. That's a great thing to do, and they're very quiet about it. Timpsons, does anyone know Timpsons? The locks, whatever. I didn't know until I heard it on Radio 4 a few weeks ago that Timpsons, 30% of their staff come from Her Majesty's prisons. Okay, they actively recruit in Her Majesty's prisons because they want to create opportunity for people. 30% of it, it's a big operation. And they've been doing it for years and years and years, quietly, no fuss, no palaver. That's a great thing to do. But what we're interested in, and this is not necessarily what you're interested in at the moment, but what we're interested in is the Holy Grail. So the argument I would present if I had longer is, 1, social enterprise, in the traditional sense, is a good thing. Let many flowers bloom. However, they're not necessarily growing, and they're not necessarily having a structural impact on the world. Some people believe they can do. Not entirely convinced myself. The public sector has its hands and legs tied behind itself at the moment, but that may change. If you want to make structural, large-scale change in the world, to a certain extent, it is going to have to be driven by the corporate sector. It's going to have to be driven. We haven't got time not for it to be done the hard way by social enterprise. So what we're interested in, and there are some good examples of people starting to do this, like Unilever, etc., is looking at organizations, values, mission, whatever, and applying that throughout their supply chains. So they're not saying, we are good, and then hiding stuff behind them. BBC Panorama program recently about Apple. Apple had made some very big promises about what they were going to do. Apple were caught short by breaking their own promises. A, by the way labour was treated in China, and B, how tin was getting into their supply chains in places, and with children working, etc., etc. They got caught short. They made promises and got caught short. So we're interested in about how we can help corporates do things better throughout their supply chain to make a difference. One quick example, the Home Depot, which is a bit like B&Q in South America, it actually, in certain communities, it's gone to them and said, okay, we need X thousand widgets made. We will give you the cash and some expertise to set up a business to produce those widgets, and you can sell them into our supply chain. So that's another example of good practice. So, like Kerry, our punchline is there's no one best way of organising social change. There are many examples and many historic examples. There's many ways of doing things. What works and what makes a difference. And crucially, like I said earlier, it can be done through a charity or a social venture, social organisation, or if you're in a corporate or a university, change can happen. I won't go into this in too much because I think it'll be picked up later, but it's, we think the landscape will change by looking at innovation in the business model, scaling up competition, demonstrating impact, and social finance, which I can talk to you about later. So, for us, in our work, what we're looking at is these 3 things. IKEA. IKEA has promised that all of its products will be made out of sustainable wood by X time. Now, that's fantastic. Yes? That's good. However, I'm not saying IKEA are, but if you're still paying the people who are making, cutting the wood or growing it, below poverty wages, it's not quite so good. So all we're interested in is the combination of the sustainability agenda, which is very important, socio-economic justice about, tackling poverty and disadvantage, but also political justice in the sense that people are involved in the business or whatever, in their life. That's what we're interested in at the moment. So we've created a new centre at the business school at Cambridge Judge. Research, teaching, new masters in 2016, but also engagement. And that's why I'm here. We're not a typical research centre. We want to engage with new generations of social ventures and people like yourselves to work with you, because this is a journey. We don't have all the answers. To work with you, hopefully to inspire you and to help create new ways of doing things in the world. That's what we're interested in. So I hope to hear from you again in the future. And thank you for listening. website, I do take guest blogs. So I'm doing solutions, from wherever. If you've got something to say, and you want a blog, I take guest blogs, please do contact me and we'll work through the process.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. That was a wonderful talk, and definitely the social enterprises and every business should be social, and that's a great notion that you raised, and thank you for that. Now I would like to welcome Andy Brady. He's going to be the chair for our panel today, and he's a senior lecturer at Lord Ashcroft Business School based in Chelmsford, and he's currently leading the university's Third Sector Future Initiative. So big applause for Andy. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. So as Rinch said, I work here, or rather I work there. I work in Chelmsford. I'm a course leader for a BA and a foundation degree and a Cert HE in charity and social enterprise management. And it's a great job because it means I get to work with people who are active leaders in the social sector, the third sector, and its professional development courses which we provide for those kind of organisations. However, after this morning, I've realised that my actual job title is reptile. Thanks, Carrie, for that, for shattering all my illusions. But I've certainly empathised with a lot of what you were saying. I empathise as well with a lot of what Neil was saying, because it's things that I was going to say as well. So thanks for that, Neil, going first. Which is good because there's going to be some audience participation, which requires that you remember the stuff that Neil said. So I hope nobody drifted off during that. I'm sure they didn't. So I want to talk about these things this morning, fairly briefly, I hope. I want to narrow things down again. I think it's been brilliant to blow the whole kind of social venture and social business and aren't all businesses social kind of expand our minds in that way. I think is a great thing. I want to narrow things back down, and I want to look at what are the differences between the different kinds of approach to creating social value, and perhaps be able, from your point of view, one of the outcomes I'd like is that you're able to delineate what a traditional social enterprise is and how we would define that. So that's SOCENT or not. That's the hashtag if you want to know more about social enterprise on Twitter. Sorry, I don't understand what you're waving for. What's the... where do I have to stand? Is that it? Right. So where's the live stream? Okay, so hello world. Anyway, I'm now standing in the right place. The second thing, I'm imagining that you're interested in social enterprise and social ventures and social businesses. And I want to help perhaps you to answer the question, is this for me? Is this kind of future for me? And thirdly, I want to look at some of the obstacles to running a successful social enterprise. And finally, to point to some other resources and sources of support. I have to explain that I was down to be the chair of this session. Another speaker dropped out, and so I've had to be parachuted in to do the third slot as well. So if anything's wrong, it's all down to that other person dropping out and nothing to do with me. I hope that's clear. Good. So here are some definitions. Can you see those? Bet you can't. Can you? They're on both screens. Yep. I need an X or something on the spot here. Is this the right sort of place? Okay. So social enterprise is a business with primarily social objectives. I'll let you read it out because it's boring. Listen to other people read out PowerPoints, as our students tell us all the time. Fairly similar definitions. One is from the now defunct Business Link, which is pretty much a website now. And one is from Social Enterprise UK, which is a good, I'm going to mention them hopefully later on, but if I forget, remember it from now. Social Enterprise UK is a good source for more information, funnily enough, about social enterprise. I can't be doing with all those long wordy definitions, so here's an easy definition which we use and most people would recognize as a rule of thumb for identifying a social enterprise. It starts from a social aim, and there's no shortage of social aims. Social aims as in rectifying something that's wrong with the world, scratching some itch which just has to be dealt with. And I think you could probably think of, if I just picked on people at random, shall I do that? Can you think of something that's wrong? You're looking at me, big mistake. Is there anything wrong in the world that you think should be changed? What's wrong with the world?
I don't know, probably I will change something regarding all the pharmaceutical company.
Okay.
So they should be doing less profit and focusing more to needs.
Okay, so a big fairness kind of and justice and injustice in the pharmaceutical world. You did look at me just briefly there. Yeah, anything wrong with the world that you want to write? What's nothing? Okay, right, that's good. I can go home. Any other social issues? Anyone want to? Yep, over there. Homelessness, right. So I could, if I gave you a couple of minutes rather than picking on you, sorry. You got one more at the back? Our leaders, right, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if social enterprise, yeah, there could be social enterprises that are looking to enable more people to enter politics and change those leaders. The point is, there's no shortage of things that are wrong. We can easily, if I gave you a couple more minutes to prepare, everyone could think of probably 5, 10, 15, 20 things that are wrong with the world. And if you want to look at lists of that, you can look at lists of charitable objectives. Go to the Charity Commission website and look up what charitable purposes are, and there's a list as long as your arm. So far, so charity, so not-for-profit, so third sector. You've got these organisations which exist to make some change in the world. They're not part of government, they are independent, but they could just go down the traditional rattling a tin and getting donations and applying for grant funding, waiting for people to die and leave them money. And the kind of traditional routes to funding from for charities which have worked really well for hundreds of years. And I'm glad that, you know, we have that point that this is a long tradition. The crucial difference with a social enterprise is the trading factor. So as well as having the social purpose and being driven by that sense of something wrong which needs to be put right, there's a trading activity, a market orientation, trading in goods, trading in services. Crucially, with this social enterprise model, the profits from that trading activity are generated in order to tackle the social problem. Now, there's all kinds of hybrid and different models, and there's all the big spectrum of different sorts of organizations, but generally the principle is that private profit is less important than social impact in terms of how those profits are spent, okay? So what I want to do now is get you to talk to each other. And I'm going to show you 5 pictures, and I'll tell you a little bit about those pictures. And I want you to say, is this a social enterprise or is it not a social enterprise? So I want you to just murmur to each other. Yeah, you can do it really loud, or you can just go like that. In fact, if you haven't got a clue, you could just go, and I would not really know any better. But what I want you to do, I'm going to show you some different organizations, and I want you to talk to a neighbor or 2, 3 of you and say, is it a sockent or is it not a sockent? Okay? And then we'll go through and we'll find out the answers at the end. So this is a shop. It's a shop in Rochdale in 1844. Not a particularly well-stocked shop. That's all I'm going to tell you about it. And I want you to quickly say to your partners, is that a sockent or not a sockent? So quickly. You're not murmuring enough. Murmur louder. Come on. Okay, stop murmuring now. Stop, stop. What have I unleashed here? Stop, stop. Right, okay. We're going to go through them all and then we'll go back and we'll, let's just go back. Yeah. Neil, thanks. Here's a fancy eatery in London. In this place, you can buy Sicilian fisherman's stew and it will cost you £28. Anyone from Sicily here? You are, brilliant. Okay, how much is stew in Sicily? How much does stew, you know, like a casserole kind of average meal? €6. Okay, here it's £28 for your Sicilian fisherman's stew. The Sicilian fishermen are lining up in the street around this restaurant. So, fancy restaurant, 28 quid, Sicilian fisherman's stew. Talk about it now. Okay, stop talking about that one now. Stop. Stop talking about food. We will get lunch as well, so don't panic. No Sicilian fisherman stew. We couldn't afford it. Here's a really successful businesswoman. Look, she's just won an award, Businesswoman Award from Verve. She doesn't make champagne. She makes chutney and jam. Okay, this is a woman who makes chutney and jam. Does she look like a social entrepreneur to you? Let's be really judgmental now and say, does this person look like a social entrepreneur? Talk about that. You're going to remember your answers in a minute, yeah? Okay, next picture, next picture. Here are some monks. And again, Neil, I think you were looking at my slides and you just threw these things in to sabotage me. Here are some monks. These are the monks involved in the production and, by the look of it, consumption of wine as well. So I'd like you now to talk about monastic production of wine, perhaps in the Middle Ages, perhaps today, and discuss whether that could be seen as social enterprise. How are you getting on? Okay, last one. Okay, this is Bupa, which is an organisation. Have you heard of Bupa? Do you need to know what that is? So it's a private health insurance organisation, £1 billion industry, £1 billion corporation, worldwide operations. Chief exec who probably earns well into the millions. And they do private health insurance and health and social care provision. Okay, take it away. Okay, let's go back. So let's hear it for the shop. Sockent or not? You have to say like sockent or not. Okay, so sockent or not? Sockent. Why? It's just a shop with some old cheese in it. It's a co-op. It's the Rochdale Equitable Society of Pioneers, which was one of the original co-ops in the UK. And yeah, we'll talk about them and why they're a social enterprise in a little while, but they are. And you can see on the wall there, the principles of cooperation. And this is actually a museum, the original shop that they opened in Rochdale. So if you're in Rochdale and there's nothing to do, which if you're in Rochdale is pretty much a given, then go to the museum. It's really interesting in Toad Lane. Okay, so sockent or not for this restaurant? I heard some knots. How can anywhere that charges £28 for fisherman's stew be a social enterprise? It is a social enterprise. It's the one that Neil was talking about with the 15 Foundation. Okay, so we'll talk again in a minute about why, but it is. Here she is, businesswoman, successful, award-winning. None of the things that it can be in the third sector. The third sector is all about, what was it? You said some good things about your preconceptions, Carrie, about the third sector. It wouldn't be quite as good, but people would buy from it anyway. Here's an award-winning businesswoman. Sockent or not? Yeah, okay. She must have a nice face, a kind face. Right. So what about the monastic wine people? This is where you maybe were listening before. Sockent. What about Bupa? Private health insurance, £1 million chief exec, £1 billion turnover. Sockent? Yeah, you're kind of getting the idea. Right, okay, I'll bow out there. So what you can do as a way of just telling whether something's a social enterprise is to look at that three-part model, so the sort of loops that were going around before. So is there a social aim? Is there a social purpose to the business? And in all of these cases, you could argue there was a social purpose. And I won't read them out, but you can have a look both ways. Is there a trading activity? Yes. And then the one that gets sometimes a little bit tricky and a little bit murky and interesting is what happens to the proceeds and the profits from the trading activity. Now, Ruby's in the Rubble, which is the jam and chutney kind of enterprise that she was winning the award for, is described as a social enterprise routinely. Looking at the ownership structure, and all I can find out, I haven't looked at their memorandum and articles, but it's a company limited by shares, and I think there's 2 people who own it. Theoretically, I don't think there's anything to stop those people taking a huge amount of private profit out of that organization. So are they technically a social enterprise by the kind of traditional thing, or are they more on the social business, social venture side of things? I don't know, but you know, it's interesting that things work like this. Pretty much no one would say that Bupa is a social enterprise in the UK. People love the National Health Service in the UK. It's traditionally seen as a really popular institution, and Bupa is kind of the anti-NHS in a lot of people's minds, including mine, certainly when I was younger. They're the private sector alternative. Theoretically, though, they could describe themselves as a social enterprise. There's no individuals taking private profit. There's no shareholders in Bupa. It's a company limited by guarantee. It makes billions of pounds. It turns over billions of pounds. It makes a big profit. It pays its chief executive a lot of money. But is it active in the social space? Yeah, it provides health and social care. It does health insurance for people. It's good. It's benefiting people. They certainly trade, and there's no private profit. So it's a difficult thing to nail the jelly in terms of defining social enterprise, and sometimes it's a bit trickier than others. So don't believe, don't judge a book by its cover, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Let's have some conclusions. So, things about social enterprise. It's older than you think. Back to the monks, yeah, in the Middle Ages, back to the 19th century. It's often presented, and since the late 1990s and early 2000s, social enterprise has been talked about in these terms, social enterprise, and government got onto the kind of bandwagon, and people began to talk about it as a really exciting way of combining business with social good. However, it's actually been around for a bit longer than that. It just wasn't called social enterprise. It encompasses all types of trading. Because of the late substitution, I was working on this presentation this morning. I hadn't had my breakfast, so it occurs to me now that all of the social enterprises bar one were to do with food or drink. So maybe there's something, but there are lots of different industries in which social enterprise is active. It's international. Some charities trade, and some charities are technically, you can describe them as social enterprise. Cooperatives are. Community interest company is a legal form which has been set up just for social enterprises. There's a kind of blurry boundary between the social enterprise and the private sector. And also, self-definition has a part to play. So saying that you're a social enterprise is a choice. There's no single legal structure. There's no single agreed definition. You can imagine academics arguing about the definition, and you don't have to imagine it. I go to conferences where that's all they do. But if you want to describe yourself as a social enterprise, the only thing that can stop you doing that are other social enterprises saying you're not actually a proper social enterprise. So it's a kind of open market. Bupa, for example, which possibly could describe itself as a social enterprise, as we've seen, chooses not to, perhaps because it would demean its brand as an alternative, slightly superior version of health provision than the public sector. I don't know, you'd have to ask them. So there is a kind of spectrum, and I think both our speakers have alluded to this fact, and I think this this kind of spectrum is illustrated well here by this diagram from a company called Clearly So. And over here we've got the charity. I mean, where it says generating no revenues, I'm not sure. Maybe the revenues from trade, but yeah. Purely voluntary, could be. Social enterprise, but there's an intersection between the two where it's difficult to tell. That's the key thing. Social business, so there's driven by social value, driven by social impact, but with a clearer commercial emphasis. And again, there's a boundary there. Right up to the for-profit company, which is increasingly taking corporate social responsibility more seriously. And I think you can have an impact, as Neil was saying, I think you can have an impact in all of these different areas. And I think you can have an impact in the public sector as well, to do better things, to create better, greater social value. So it's difficult to run a social enterprise because, and again, Neil referred to this, they're more likely to work in deprived communities, areas of multiple deprivation and so on. 38% of social enterprises operate in such areas. I think the figure for private business is about 15%. So they're areas of market failure, areas where it's difficult to turn a profit. But they've got a younger profile, they've got a higher BME profile, more women are involved with social enterprise. They're accountable, and they're also growing. I think, Neil, it's interesting, because it's difficult to define social enterprise, it's also difficult to know whether they're growing or not. There is evidence to suggest that social enterprises are starting up at a greater rate than private businesses. And there are reasons people like to do this stuff. We haven't got time to go into what a social entrepreneur is, but just let's, for now, use it as a person who's working on a social enterprise. And here are 3 quotes which illustrate what it feels like. So one is probably something which business leaders could say generally, someone who starts their own business. You're a pioneer, you're doing something new, you're setting your own course. There's this idea of independence. I think it encompasses things like ambition as well, making a difference, passion. The second one, my hands are tied, so I can't get anything done. I'm working in a restrictive environment at the moment in a charity. If I go into a charity, they'll just tell me what I can and can't do. They'll have the old mindset. If I work in government, that's a bureaucratic area and it's difficult to get things done. Here I can do what I want to do. I can instigate the response to social problems which I want to. And of course, there's a social mission, which is an overwhelming need that felt difficult to ignore. So just the feeling of being driven to do something. These are some of the motivating factors. And you may or may not identify with any or all of these points. If you do, and if you're thinking, oh, I'd love to do this, I'd love to start, who wants to start their own business, just out of interest in the audience? Who wants to start their own business? Okay. And any time in the future, you might run a business. Again, hands, just quick. Yeah, quite a lot. Who's thinking they might want to do something in the social enterprise space? Maybe. Yep. Okay. A sprinkling again. Quite a lot, actually. That's good. Right. So I sort of don't care, right, whether you start a social enterprise or not, because I think it's a really difficult decision to make, and I think it's really something which is up to you. And a little bell doesn't go off in my office every time a social enterprise gets started. I have no vested interest in people starting social enterprises. I think you should only do it if you actually think it's right for you. And there are loads of other ways that you can deliver, social justice and social value in all different sorts of careers. So you need to think about it, and think about these 3 questions in particular. And this is going back to things that that Carrie touched on as well. Sometimes the social mission, the social goal, blocks everything out in your mind. And you just think, well, someone will pay for it because it's such a good thing. What I'm doing is such a good thing. It's so needed, it's so required. I'm not going to worry about the money and that kind of stuff. Big mistake. Worry about the money. Always worry about the money. Don't run out of cash. So, and it might not all be trading income. It's possible to have a social enterprise kind of mixed economy model where you have income from charitable sources as well, even hybrids where you have private sector investment also. This is a quote from Peter Drucker. Think about your customer, but think of also about what they think they are buying. Too many people are really identified with what Carrie was saying about asking people what their needs are, asking people how they can solve those needs, what that need was costing them at the moment. Start from the position of your customer rather than starting from the position of, this is a great idea I've got here. Like it, like me. Why are you not liking me? I hate this. Why are you being, and you get all reptile and then it's a nightmare. So start with what the customer thinks he or she is buying, what he considers value, rather than what you think is a really neat idea. And then, I don't know if you've done this sort of thing. If you're a business school student, you might have come across the Blue Ocean strategy. red ocean and all that. So the red ocean is the one where all the fish are eating each other and it's full of blood. That's why it's a red ocean. And the blue ocean is where you find a new market, which is not tainted with all that kind of competition. You could think maybe about Nintendo taking the console debate away from, I don't know, boys in their bedrooms with Xboxes and PlayStations, and think, well, actually, we're going to look at a family set of games and a family console for the Nintendo Wii all those years ago. The danger is that many social enterprises are actually choosing, because they're working in such difficult areas, in such difficult markets, that you're not in any ocean at all. You're in a kind of dead sea where there's never been any fish. And there's a reason that there is no competition, and that's because there's no profit to be made. So be aware of your competition, and perhaps they know something you don't. Very quickly, haven't got time for that, but it's a nice picture of the Cheshire Cat. Quickly onto sources of support, because you do need your lunch. So don't neglect friends and colleagues and individuals that you can meet through networking. And I'd add other organizations in there as well. Try to meet people who are in this space already. They can teach you a lot and you can learn a lot from them. And you can also just think of better things together. So there's a book by Stephen Johnson called Where Good Ideas Come From, I think, off the top of my head. And in that book, he talks about the adjacent possible. So if you mix with lots of different people, mix with creative people, mix with people who are active in this space, what is possible rises exponentially. If you're just isolated, there's a lot of literature about entrepreneurship which suggests it's a kind of heroic endeavor which is carried out by one individual on their own, not networked, not embedded in any kind of community or social network in any way. And I tend to disagree with that as the only way of being an entrepreneur, I think, or a social entrepreneur. I think it's quite possible that you can do that on a team and a collective basis too. And if nothing else, your ideas will be better as a result of that. There's loads of books. I've brought some books, but quickly, really short and really easy book to read about this stuff is this one, Your Chance to Change the World. If you want to know what it's called and you've forgotten and you can't write it down, just come and look at it afterwards. There are loads of books on social entrepreneurship. There's loads of websites. I mentioned the Social Enterprise UK website. There's a support organisation called Inspire to Enterprise, which will do, I think, free phone consultation with people. If you've got an idea, they'll help you to think about it. Kind of replace, there's the business link stuff on gov.uk. Finance, all sorts of finance available for social ventures, not always in the form that people want it. A lot of people want it in the form where you give me money and there's no risk to me. That seems to be less popular among funders than it used to be, that idea. So you can look at things like Big Society Capital for ways of attracting finance and investment. There are also individuals doing this kind of thing as well, and other companies. Another way that you can get involved is by getting on with it. So if you're interested in and passionate about social issues, then why not volunteer with an existing organisation to learn more about it? Why not start to do the thing that you want to do in the future now? Why not try generating some income through the thing that you imagine is going to generate income long term? If you try it now and it doesn't, then maybe you can change the template. So there's no substitute, I think, for getting on and trying things and trying to be to form your social enterprise from the word go. Okay, there's loads more I could say, but we have got to stop, so I'm going to. There's my contact details, and I'll leave it there. But I think, are we going to still try and do some Q&A stuff? Yes, the chairs of destiny are coming. So I think our fellow speakers are going to come down now.
Mic check, 1 2 1 2.
So if you've got a question, start thinking now about whether you're brave enough to put your hand up and ask it.
Also, we're receiving questions by Twitter. Anyone of you who are watching live stream, you can ask on Twitter, Angly Enter. There's the live stream.
I'm trying to stagger that so that you can just sit forward, Neil, because then you'll be on the telly or something. Lovely, brilliant. So who's got a question? Hands up. Other than where's my lunch? Come on. Or a comment, or a disagreement, or an argument.
I got a question. So statistically, how many entrepreneurs on the total of the entrepreneurs there are trying to get involved in social entrepreneurship?
Yeah.
On the total.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So how big a thing is this, really, is what you're saying? Yeah.
Like 5%.
Okay.
Of the total entrepreneurship.
Okay. Any thoughts on that panel?
No, frankly. But what I have noticed, as I mentioned earlier in the Judge Business School, amongst the entrepreneurs that are coming forward, a fairly high proportion, A, want to be a classic social enterprise, or B, have the value set to take into their full for profit. It's a mindset. I think a lot of young people and a lot of the PhDs in science, etc., have got that mindset from somewhere. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between entrepreneurs of any hue. The same things. I mean, Andy alluded to them. The drive, the frustration. They want to do things differently, not wanting to work in a big organization, whatever it may be. There's a lot of similarities. What social entrepreneurs bring is that passion, that wanting to make change in a different sort of way, I would suggest.
Right. What do you think, Carrie? Anything to add?
No, not very much. Two things. One, I agree with you, Neil. I think many people, particularly millennials, Gen Z, Gen Y, they just don't accept the old corporate values, the environment in which I started a business, and they're natural social entrepreneurs, even if they don't have a very specific cause. The other thing I'd say is, as the complexity and density of media massively increases and we put more and more filters on that, my world becomes a bubble of people doing the same thing as me. So to me, it looks like everybody's doing it, and they're not. So we have to be cautious that we understand the world outside us, not just the one we filtered in.
That's right. In a world where 1 million people sign a petition to reinstate Jeremy Clarkson, I think there's a long way to go, probably. The only thing I'd add is that there are estimated to be 70,000 social enterprises in the UK. There are around 160,000 charities in the UK. I think there's about 4 million plus private businesses in total in the UK. So it is a small thing, and we can be in danger of that being in that bubble. Great question, though. Thanks. Oh, sorry.
There's questions now.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Artem.
If we assume that the business structure is a partnership, what are the benefits to have a partner from the social enterprise? So, I mean, one is for profit,
Okay.
and one is doing some covering social issues. What are the benefits having a social enterprise partner?
That's a great question. You do stuff like this, don't you?
I don't think I quite understand the question. Do you mean a partner as in the two people running the business, or corporate?
What are the benefits to combining the two?
Yeah, the partnership consists of two companies. One company
yes.
is the social enterprise, but they're doing it together.
Yeah.
There's lots of examples. I mean, when I set up Keystone many years ago, charity, I just set up a trading company as well. Didn't use it though, for various reasons, because but some people are doing that. They're full for profit, and they're not for private profit entity at the same time, doing different things. One example is a student society that's Cambridge Globalist. That is a very good international magazine. They're going to have the company to sell and market and get advertising, but they've got a foundation as well to teach new young journalists. So that's a model. Yeah. The key is, don't get obsessed about legal models. It's what works at the right time, I think.
But I think the question hinted at a human side as well. Carrie, do you want to cover that? Yeah, like the input from those backgrounds, as well as the institution. It's the people.
No, I mean the two companies.
Two companies, sorry. Okay.
Oh la la, this is a very relevant question. I think this is one of the questions about in my world, and certainly it's one I'm addressing with 50th Generation. So 50th Generation is a not-for-profit, although it's a private company. And do we need a trust into which people could contribute money, or where my money is being contributed, because we have a trading arm. We sell 50th generation to corporates. They spend £250,000 running a 50th generation. And I think you've got to get clean as soon as you need to, because otherwise I think you do need two separate entities, but the problem is it creates complexity, and there's quite a lot of cost in setting up and administering both types. So you don't want to do it too soon, but you need to do it soon enough so you're clean to the outside world. Otherwise it's murky. And somebody said something to me the other day, which I've never heard myself, but they say, oh, Cambridge is full of people, trying to do basically on the make, but looking like they're trying to do something good. I thought, oh gosh, that, how depressing. But if that's what people feel, then we need to be as clean as possible about our intent for each of our organisations.
Yeah,
sorry, just one more thing. The benefit, I think, as well as to that approach is the different worlds. So it's very easy to be in a bubble, and it's very easy for people in a social enterprise environment to think that they have the only answers. It's equally easy for people in the private sector to think that their model is the only way that you can change the world or do business, in fact. And there are massive benefits to people from the different worlds coming up against each other and learning from each other, which they inevitably will do, I think. I want to give a bit more time for questions, Neil. Sorry, yeah. And there was one further down, yeah. Okay. Passion plus what? To set up a social
passion
venture.
plus pragmatism. Yeah, the ability to take critical feedback, because I think one of the things that Andy said, which is very important, is that people have these ideas that they think is fantastic, but no one else is going to buy it. I mean, that's pretty key. So it's that balance between passion and pragmatism.
Passion and awareness of your reptile. That's it. Oh, you have one.
Right. Okay.
And do we have a Twitter question?
Oh, blimey. Right. It's all happening. Look. Right. So, what is the difference between a social enterprise and a purpose-led business?
Thank you, Lou.
Right.
So first thing is, I think we can't get hung up on language. So social venture, social business, purpose-led business, conscious capitalism, there are loads of words and they mean different things to different people. So yes, we need to be careful about language, but when we can't create a glossary that I can't make people believe what I believe about those words. So specifically the difference between a social enterprise and a purpose-led business. I think they're from the same stable, but I think they fall just either side of whether it basically, are we a KIC? Are we a community interest company where we are legally bound to restore our profits to our community or our social aim? Or do we fall the other side of the line, and are we first and foremost a private company that chooses to operate in a particular way? And I think that line is so blurred at the moment. And for example, in the most recent intake in 50th generation, we had 8 companies, 4 were community interest companies and 4 were private businesses. And yet we had exactly the same passion, purpose, philosophy. So it's a great question to which I don't have a very articulate answer. But Neil might.
No, I don't. You see, I don't. I mean, like Andy said earlier, I really don't care, because it's about the values and it's about the impact that's important. And I would add about the promise. If you're making a promise that you can do X, Y, and Z, you have to keep to your promise. That's where it can get grey. People say, we are a social enterprise, we are virtuous, but they're doing very bad things or bad practices elsewhere. So frankly, I don't care. Social Incubator East is a complete cross-section of different legal forms emerging. Again, what's appropriate? But what's important to me, I repeat endlessly, is the value, the mission, the impact, and upholding your promises.
See, I'm fine with it being broad and I'm fine with it being messy, but I think clarity is useful, and discussing these things within reason. What defines a social business? What defines a social enterprise? What is a social venture? I mean, those things are useful, because if somebody's claiming, the Cambridge people you alluded to, who said that Cambridge is full of people pretending they're nice and they're actually just trying to turn a profit, that kind of thing can get legitimate social enterprise into hot water as well. I think so. There's a case for defamation.
See, I'm going to disagree. I'm just going to disagree slightly. Charities, some charities, everyone assumes is doing good and are virtuous just because they are called charities, and just because you put the word social in front of something, it does not mean you are virtuous. Some charities are the worst employers in the world. And I've said on the open web, bullying hotline was set up to stop bullying in schools. It's fallen apart, and allegedly, certain senior staff were bullying their staff. I mean, irony upon ironies. Virtue is not assumed; it has to be earned.
No, I've forgotten it.
I think, have we got time for one more?
Oh no,
question?
I have
Yes, you have
remembered.
remembered. That always happens.
Let's be really careful that we don't reinforce the old way. So what the world is saying by saying, "Oh, Cambridge is full of people doing good things," but who are basically on the make, is they're saying you shouldn't make money if you're trying to do a good thing. And I think part of our job is to carefully navigate and carve out this new path where of all the bad things that not-for-profits can do, or social businesses can do, making money isn't one of them. Making money is a good thing that creates abundance and scale and sustainability, and creates people who are independent of their businesses and therefore can set up other businesses as well. And that's a good thing. So we've got to change that mindset.
Thank you. And one more here. Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Very engaging, very inspiring. This is mostly a question for Carrie, but anybody is welcome to answer that. There's this element of humility or the need for an iterative process when not only starting, but also running a social enterprise. And I'm curious if you have personal anecdotes of how you, for example, if you go out, you gather data, you think that there is a social need, and you recognize what you had preconceived is actually wrong and the need may be different, of how to put aside that reptile in you and think at the bigger picture of what needs to be done, but maintaining credibility as an institution so that you don't seem too wish-washy.
Yeah, so two really good question. I think there are two things here. One is it's very hard to manage your reptile from within yourself. So what helps are conversations with great people, and you might call them coaches or mentors, who can help you, who can ask the questions that you can't quite ask yourself, like, what is it you fear about this situation? I've had businesses that, and in fact, even in the last 2 years, one of my main businesses got to the stage where I thought it was going to close. And the reptilian fears that came up in me with that, I'm supposed to be good at running businesses, and my incubator is based on me being a successful entrepreneur. And what if my biggest business closes? But conversations with people outside of your own brain really help with that. And that's true on a micro level as well, around a project or a product. The second thing is, I think we, as humans, we respect honesty and clean communication. So I'm a big fan of spelling out the grey areas, speaking honestly, not spinning things. So, for example, saying to somebody else, this is where we are at the moment. These are the answers we don't have. You'd think we would have the answers. We don't. I don't know what's going to happen next. This is what we're going to do next. And just acknowledging that there are some grey areas, and that isn't uncredible, that's credible.
One thing I'd say is in Cambridge, we're very, very lucky. You have many people who are very experienced in this world, and also people who are coming up in the last 3 years. Quite a few in this room from Social Incubator East and other places. So there's a lot of people out there who you can bounce ideas off. I think the best sort of people to bounce ideas off are not the ones who tell you how fantastic you are, or your business is, or whatever, all the time. But ask the difficult questions, and the ability to listen, to those, and ask yourself those difficult questions is very, very important. I mean, I think we know that a lot of businesses fail. Ordinary businesses fail. I can't remember, was it third of all new businesses fail in the first 3 or 4 years? And that includes social enterprises. There's some spectacular failures. There's a quote Andy put up from Aspire. I think it's a classic, failure in the social enterprise world, which shocked everybody. But it's trite to say, but I think all of us have done it. When you do fail, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You learn. I've had some spectacular failures, and I've learnt more from that than I've learnt from my successes. Life's a risk.
And there's something somebody very powerful said to me a couple of weeks ago, which is if, it's not wrong to stop. If the data is telling you something, stop. And that can trigger a whole load of things, including customers saying, where did you go? Come back, come back, come back. I did that with the 50th Generation Open Lecture Series last year. We ran 7 in a row. It was quite exhausting. I think everybody was slightly exhausted by being emailed by me. In the end, I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to stop. I'm not going to run anymore and see what happens. And then something really powerful often happens next.
Okay. Thanks, I've got one.
So,
am I right? There's another question on Twitter. I'm getting up to speed here. Is there any central point for finding resources local to Cambridge? Is a question from Space.
There's no central point. I mean, one good port of call, I'm sorry to plug it, is the Centre for Social Innovation website, because a lot of the people involved are featured on there. You can always contact Social Incubator East and Belinda Bell, who's director there, for some advice, or the Future Business Centre in general, which is on King Cities Road. There's a team of people there, including Neil Prem, who give a lot of support, etc. But if you want to find out more, you can contact any of us through the normal channels, frankly.
I'd agree with that. And but if you're interested in a more traditional approach or interested in volunteering for charity or working with a charity, starting one yourself, then Cambridge CVS, so it's Council for Voluntary Service, is a good source of information. They're not great for social enterprise
Sorry, I'm the Student Hub. I just remembered the Cambridge.
Where are they?
Cambridge Hub.
Cambridge Hub.
They give you a bad look then. Okay. And yeah, I'd echo what Neil said. Write to us.
Yeah.
Find us. Write to us. Yeah. Good. Any more questions? Yes. Last one.
Yeah, I was just wondering, it said that some companies do social activities, but they don't communicate that to the wider world. Is it because the value of what they did diminishes when they try to kind of promote it and get something out of it? I mean, is it the case?
Well, it could be partly, because
they can get something out
yeah.
of it, right?
I think it could be because they're humble. I mean, Timpson's a really good example. Until recently, they've been doing it for years and years. They just get on with it, just do it. So that's one reason. 2 is that I think CSR, corporate social responsibility, is somewhat tainted, and people are very quite cynical of that activities. So it's become more of a PR negative than a hit at times. So there's a number of reasons, I'd have thought. Sometimes those who shout the loudest aren't necessarily doing the best things, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think there's a bit of a celebrity culture growing up around these sort of heroic people who are doing amazing things in social business, and I don't like it. And I think we need to be really careful of that, and we all individually need to be really careful of that.
And I think you can overestimate the premium in terms of market share or anything else that you get from being socially active or delivering social impact. There's some market research that's been done that suggested that 20% of people, if they found out that a company was a social enterprise, would on principle not buy from that organization because they knew it was a social enterprise. And I teach people who work in the social sector, and we talk about ethical shopping and that kind of thing. And you'd be amazed how many people are just not bothered who they get their broadband and their do their banking with and all that kind of. It's just not an issue. And these are theoretically the ideal people to be thinking about those purchasing decisions. So maybe that's another answer to that question. I'm going to stop now, I think. Are you happy if we stop now and we can eat something? Right, thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. So the sandwiches are here. There's going to be the first part of the conference is over, and now we're going to have a lunch and networking event. There's some exhibitions happening there. You're free to talk to everyone here. And starting, I believe, at 1:30, we'll have workshop training session with Janie Gutka from Cambridge Help there, Liz Parker from Cambridge, I forgot, academic performance, yes, and the Nick from Delta T, and also Simprint, and if I believe Elena Shampanova, where is she? Yeah, she's going to be there. Okay, thank you very much. So please welcome to buffet.
Are they your glasses? Aren't
Hey Andy, say hi to everyone.
Hi or bye. Hello. I hope that was interesting if you're watching on the internet.
Yeah.
Bye.
Hi guys. You can. This is the live. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm gonna move you towards here where the discussions are. I think it's good. It was really good. Everybody enjoyed it.
The paddle, did you have cushion that far?
2 pushes.
Okay, right. Hello! We're here eating. Let's live on the YouTube. I already said, Rich. I already said. Try to take your personality, present it as a certain formula, and when we go to the next stage, from the profile to the taking DNA.
Yeah, that's another thing I was thinking about.
Are you Christian? Are you Christian? So, calculating personality means like putting someone's soul in the formula. Going in the future, you'll be able to say this DNA, this person will be like this, these conditions, and you'll be able to DNA is the core in this formula. That's the thing. There is universities in Russia. They do the DNA analysis. This is the samples. They restore this data.
I'll happily show you around, give you a cup of coffee, and then you can talk to one or two of our marketing people. We're very small, so it's all of you know. And you can explain who you are, and they can explain what extent they would like to pursue a relationship further or not, or what they would need in terms of capability in order for work to work with us. But really, I don't speak for anything that we have. We would like to have some.
There is a market in Russia. You just need to know the places. And I know the place. So there's only one region, one state that do all the agriculture. So this should be the main area of the interest. Other areas they are not that agriculture. So
there we are.
I cycle.
Give me a call or an email. But I don't
Yeah, I think I'll start in May or June, just before I leave, so I can be updated dates on what we have. Then I can start working with the companies there. Because here, what I got in the Cambridge is a big spin out of myself, and I know that when I go to Russia, I can't sit peacefully doing nothing. I just feel like Cambridge going around and around and around. Yes, and the main thing that we need a huge demand is just exactly the area where I'm from. They try to use agricultural context. The water is really deep inside underground, so there should be a efficient way of getting the water outside and build an irrigating system for the fields. Otherwise, all this area is like semi-desert, like it's called steppe. Yeah. They try to build agricultural complex, but it's really hard to put the water. It's too expensive.
So we don't provide irrigation equipment. We provide services, data and the industry supplies
Yeah, but first, because the land is that cheap, first you can analyze where it's better to put your farm, so the water is the closest, and you can analyze what's this ground. That's Russia. It's they start with the research and development. Yeah.
providing the tools they need to evaluate
Because all the research and development was done during the Soviet times, and all this data belongs to the government. It's really hard to get this information unless you're a friend of someone there or you put nice money and drive. That's the thing. Thank you very much. It's nice to talk to you. Well, probably maybe.
Sorry, can I have your attention, please? The workshop and the case studies are open. If you can go to the LAB who's interested in it, LAB 107 and 109, just down the corridor, and we'll see you there. Thank you very much. You can stay here alternatively, but I really recommend you do it. Hi, Nick.
Hey, is that live?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that's scary.
You think so? Hi. Say hi.
Oh, hey. Hi.
I'll see you around.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me? 1 2 1 2 1 2. Yeah. Okay, hello everyone again. Um, this is the case study group. So we'll be learning about companies and startups. So first of all, it's a very successful venture, Nick Webb from Delta T. Delta T is, he'll talk about Delta T more in detail, but it's a very successful venture. So also co-owned business, what do you call it?
It's owned by the members.
Was owned by the members, yeah. So there's no real CEO. There, well, there's some structure, but basically all level. Yeah. Okay. Now, please, yep. Round of applause to Niels. Nick Webb. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Before I start, I was really impressed by this booklet, which I've been avidly reading, how to put on a presentation. So there are 10 rules you mustn't break, and I realize I'm going to break them all except the 10th one, which is you can break the other rules. So there we go. I'm the principal scientist at Delta T Devices, which is a manufacturing cooperative, a members cooperative. And I'm going to try and make this work. It was set up in the early 1970s by one guy and ex-chemical engineer from Cambridge University in this shed, the Elizabethan barn. And 40 years on, just down the way here, you can see these buildings on the right and the rest of the same company. So we've grown in the garden where we started up. So one of the things in the PowerPoint I'm told what to do is ask you questions. So we make a range of high-tech scientific instruments, and you're going to have to identify them all for me. So does anybody know what an automatic porometer does? Porometer, it measures stomata in plant leaves. Does anyone know what a stomata in a plant leaf is? Okay, we failed there. So this is, if you were a doctor, you'd have a stethoscope and you'd check your patient with your stethoscope. If you're a plant scientist, this is one of the ways you'd check your plant. It tells you how open are the tiny pores in the leaves that breathe out oxygen and water vapor and breathe in CO2 and turn it into carbon. So this is one of our products we make and we sell to the plant sciences community, agricultural communities all over the world to over 70 countries. Most of our products we export and we design and make them ourselves. We also sell sensors on a stick. That's what I call them. The posh name is a weather station. I've designed all our weather stations. This particular stick is meant to be portable and therefore everything is stuck on one piece of folded metal. So you can chuck it in a car and move it up somewhere else. And the little box in the middle there is the data logger, and we have a series of data loggers we've been selling since the 1980s for recording information from our environmental sensors. Another product line we've been selling is the instrument which measures the area of plant leaves. So the area of a plant leaf is quite important because most measures of productivity of new plants depend, well, one of the key measures, I'm sorry, is the area of the plant leaves. So even though people are doing high-tech phenotype, gene development, manipulating DNA, doing wonderful statistics on it, in the end, you have to go out in a field on the side of your mountain, on your part of Africa, put the plants in the ground as if they grow well. And you have to measure the plant area. The leaf area is the main determinant of how well it grows. So we continue to sell this product. It's amazing. And we've been selling it for over 30, 40 years in various iterations. And then we sell soil moisture sensors. And we're best in class at the top end of soil moisture measurement. These are used in irrigation control, measuring soil moisture in embankments. And we're recognized by NASA and also the Chinese Academy of Sciences as having the best quality soil moisture sensor. It's several years running. And Finally, we sell a solar energy measuring device. This was designed by one of our ex-members who left the company. He went to Africa, did some social work, came back, set up his own company, designed this instrument, and they sell for £3,000. We've sold over 1,000 of them. So that's quite a lot of money we've made from that. Most of what we do is manufacturing. It's a factory. We make stuff. There's a lot of work involved in moving materials around, managing them, and controlling, helping subcontractors make it for us. We used to make it ourselves in the early days. Now a lot of it is made for us. And we meet this British standard for management of the business. It's a competitive environment for us. When we started, we had a lot of good ideas in a relatively new niche, and there weren't many people competing with us now. Now, there are a lot of people out there that do data loggers. It's hard for us to compete, but we still make them. And it's the same for our other products too. And our instruments being scientific instruments, they need to have accuracy which is traceable to national standards, the national unit of mass, length, and time. So we have to maintain the calibration of our test equipment. It has also ought to be traceable up through references all the way up to international standards. And it involves us in a lot of work. So we have specialists doing design work for us, and we always need the next improved design. The market is that competitive for us. We have 36 members. When you join, you get a £1 share certificate. When the company goes bust, you're legally liable as a limited company for all that £1. You're going to have to pay it to the loss adjuster. But when you leave the company, you have to give the £1 back, the £1 share back. So it's a fairly nice business to be in. Under our co-op rules, which were from the 1980s, we can't take the capital out of the company and put it in another company or take it home. So there's a lock on if the company closed down, the funds left in it would have to go into the cooperative movement. Co-op rules are changing. There's some recent ones, and you have a choice now if you adopt co-op rules of what you do should the company close. We started off with everybody meeting once a week to decide what we're going to do. And when I joined, we started to have a bit of a structure, started to have budgets and so on. But at the moment, we have a management committee that are elected every 2 years. At a general meeting, everybody has one vote at the general meeting. Every year, we find this difficult. We're in the middle of it. This year, we actually run a series of meetings before the general meeting to try and work out what people want. And we've tried various voting schemes to vote for groups of people. And just yesterday, 2 days ago, we decided to throw out our voting scheme because we didn't like it. So we sent it back to the management committee. We said we want a new voting scheme to help us figure out who we want to be the 4 managers from the 7 that have stood this year. So every year it's difficult, everywhere it's different, every year it's different. I remember one year I was voted onto the management committee in the annual general meeting, and 5 minutes later I was voted off again. So I was a bit annoyed about that. But despite all that, we do it. We've managed to keep going because basically you're making your own rules up within the confines of the company rules that are registered with Companies House. And generally, the management committee know that they need to talk to us and we need to talk to them. So we have lots of regular Thursday meetings where the members are told about and comment on and participate in the major things that we're trying to do. And about 10 years ago, or 5 or 10 years ago, we started to employ full-time managers for our 4 departments. So we have a very good development department manager. And I think the company's really improved with skilled professionals coming in, but it's a long way away from where we started, with everybody meeting around together when a Thursday morning and deciding what to do, with no departments, no budgets, no managers. In fact, the word manager was a bad word, so we used to call them resource managers. So that's not such a bad thing in those days. The narrative I'm going through is I'm telling you where we are now, and then I'll go back to tell you where we began, and then finish with a few clues to help any of you if you wanted to set up a co-op. So they are a good place to work. People are very motivated. They do get engaged. Our information systems are open. You can find the basis upon which decisions were made, or data, or whatever you need. And people do work funny hours, but we do have a notional core working hours where everybody should be there if possible. Some of our members have been there a very long time. We have 3 of the 4 startup members still in the company. And that's quite unusual, the low turnover for businesses. We've survived downturns by taking reductions in pay collectively rather than laying people off. And our differential pay, which I'll talk about later, is very low between the top earners and the bottom earners. Whereas if you all know more about it than me, but I believe in banks it can be much greater than 100 to 1. Well, we do have ethical sales policies. We used to get really excited about this in the old days, which to me was in the 1980s. So we'd refuse to sell to the military, and we'd refuse to sell to the tobacco companies. And I think at one point we refused to sell to Israel for some reason, and received tons of hate mail through the post. This was before computers about it. We were all quite shocked about it. But we still do have our ethical sales policy. There are grey areas. For instance, we sell to meteorology office, the people who do the weather forecast, but they're actually part of the British military. So, well, you know, we sell weather stations, you know, they're the best guys at doing weather. So, well, yeah, it's weather, it's, you know, that's okay. So, you know, you do compromise. We feel we're less weird. We feel we're less exploitative than normal businesses. But I have to say, all through the 80s and 90s, we get a stream of people coming through us, employers, saying, you know, in the real world out there, you know, where they do real business, you do this, this, and this. And we were always told that we were wacky because we were running a co-op. And it's nicer now that people give more respect to co-ops. And in fact, about 10, 15 years ago, I was at an institute for manufacturing beer and sandwich club meeting for business managers. And there was just me from our little co-op, and I sat next to the European director of 3M and people like that. And all these big guys from these big multinationals loved us. They wanted to know everything about us. They thought we were really cool. We were just a bunch of amateurs that tried to learn how to do stuff. But we do think in a way, and I suppose it's echoed by the whole spirit of this meeting, that we're more rational. Our problems are we can't raise share capital. We have to pay for it out of our profits. We are dependent on people within the company with the ability to develop the new high-tech products that we need. We have a problem that at the moment is 32 males and 4 females. No females in the high technical jobs in development, but very effective females in sales and marketing and in production. But it's always been hard to get good engineers. So we occasionally had brilliant female students come through, but quite frankly, they've gone on to better jobs than we can offer in terms of salaries and so on and so forth. One of our problems is getting on better with each other. It's a polite way of saying it. It's difficult, it can be difficult. You can't just sack people if they're an owner of the company. And it can be difficult for new people for a number of reasons. Particularly nowadays, people aren't that familiar with co-ops. In the 80s, we often got people who'd worked in a co-op already and they had some idea of what a co-op's about. On the other hand, you can have critical meetings where you realize amongst 40 people, there are 80 views about what is the core essentials of a cooperative. So it's very hard sometimes to come to agreement on those issues. And on those kinds of days, I prefer to get on with my day job and to go and design a scientific instrument. I'm having finger trouble. So here we are now, 36 of us, old, grey, boring, and our turnover is 3.6 million, which ain't very much if you consider what Arm Holdings has done since the 1990s. But, you know, hey, we used to be the hippies down the road in Burwell with dodgy things going on in the housing community. Now we're the major employer in Burwell. And so this is part 2 of the narrative. This is sort of our beginnings. And this is Ed Potter, who was a chemical engineer at Cambridge. And in the late 1960s, early 1970s, he was living in a caravan in Histon, in the willow copse behind there. And he had a cardboard shed behind the caravan where he built model airplanes. But he was a chemical engineer and he was working for Grant Scientific Instruments at the same time. And his take on this was if he could build model airplanes that flew, then he could do anything. And I've been thinking about this story because, you know, the difficult thing is starting up companies and how you get started. And so when I look at this, I think, well, yeah, I can see there that he likes planes and it must need a fairly meticulous, practical mind to have built that. And certainly when I was working with him over the last 40 years, he is a meticulous person. And he also became a legend as a hang gliding legend in East Anglia. If you look on the local hang gliding sites, you'll see his complete spider's web going out from Cambridgeshire of all the places he's hang glided to. So as a result now, his body's full of metal parts where he's fallen out of the sky. So in the early 70s, him and his partner and friends from Arjuna Whole Foods set up a housing community. So at that time, Vietnam War, power was bad, capitalism was bad, male chauvinism was bad, anybody with any kind of power at all was bad. They wanted to live communally and grow their own food. And they bought this farm in Burwell for £16,000 and started up a housing community. And Ed started working in a shed in the garden, trying to provide work for his members of his commune. So about 5 years on, they're having a celebration dinner because they've sold their 25th pyrometer. You remember the pyrometer at the beginning? And not only that, it was a second order, a repeat order. And not only that, it was a repeat order for 2 from the botanical laboratories in the Cambridge botany department. And so they felt they'd arrived. So Ed says about this was the first time in 5 years he felt the company had a future. So it'd been touch and go all that time whether it would continue or not. He's a few years further on. There's 2 more founding members there, the 2 guys with beards. Tom here is now a founding member of Cambridge Carbon Footprint. He's retired from Delta T. He studied science. He was one of the gang of 4 ex-Cambridge graduates. He studied science and the philosophy of science. At Delta T, he taught himself how to do electronics and designed our first data loggers and so on and so forth. Lee at the back is still there in the marketing department and he's still got the same beard. The other ladies have moved on, and you can see the kind of low high-tech equipment we were making around that time. And then a few years on, they've grown a little bit more, and they moved into the cow shed next door to the original shed and redoing the roof. And you can see what a disreputable bunch they look like. So the one in the beard in the middle at the top should have been here today giving you this talk, but he was busy. And you can see Tom down here again, and Janet Simpson, his wife, who was a key player in the early cooperative. I have to say at this point that there were a lot of ladies and partners in the cooperative. I've missed a slide. I'm going to go back. There were a lot of ladies in the early cooperative as partners, but one of the problems were, in the end, that the technical skills that were needed to carry on working in the company were coming in with the males, and gradually a lot of the females that were originally very powerful became more and more sidelined, not intentionally, but they left. So here we are now. So there are a few points along this journey I want to talk about. Over the first few years, the partners made no money at all, and zero. And then later on, they started this very low period of growth here actually was 50% a year. And that's actually, our founder says this was a very dangerous time for us to grow at that rate. So this is when I joined in the mid-80s, where we had 12 members, and I was the first scientist, and I was a bit of a threatening person to join this group then. And then we were sort of in the 90s, we went into the doldrums. Now this was the time computers came around, and we needed to be able to recruit and retain people with very high technical skills to develop software and equipment and so on and so forth. But we all had the same pay scale, and it was just not cost effective to pay everybody the kinds of salaries you'd expect to get if you're a prime software developer. But we couldn't change our pay scale because half the members, ones in production, were earning above market rates. The ones in development and other areas like that were earning below market rates. The guys in production says, this is my company. If we pay those guys more, you're taking it away from me. So we had this period of 10 years where we were really unable to develop new product or recruit or retain the technical people we knew we needed. So gradually, with lots of blood on lots of carpets, we moved over to a differential pay scheme, and it came in incrementally where we said, right, well, we'll just recruit this one person at market rates. And then there came a point where everybody I was working with, bar one in the development department, was at market rates except for me and this other guy. And finally, everyone said, oh, we have to do this. And we finally based all the jobs in all the departments on market rates, but ensuring that all the lower skilled jobs, if you like, did not lose out in terms of nobody had a reduction. But it was a very difficult, painful process for us now. Up at the end here, we're turning over about 3.6 million, and it looks rather flat and alarming again, but actually we're very profitable now. So it feels financially a lot better. And we also have a terrific development team. And I really like working in development now. And I have to say there are lots of times during my journey on the second half of this graph where I didn't enjoy it. So that's delta T. So the last bit is if you wanted to do a co-op, make your own co-op, and I think everyone here can. And I didn't know about all the resources that you people in business management knew about and are provided by this organization that's laying on today's talk. But from my point of view, if you want to start out a co-op, go to Co-ops UK. All the support you need is there. It's very, very good. And there's an ecosystem of groups around Co-ops UK that also help you get started. For instance, Microgenius has been going since 2012, allows a startup cooperative, community benefit cooperative or renewable energy cooperative company kind of place to raise share capital online. And actually this group, no, wrong one. This group down here, Reach Community Solar Farm, is one that's raising share capital at the moment. It's one I'm involved in, that's my own village, and they're halfway through now raising the share capital they need for a community benefit society. It uses cooperative rules for the benefit of the community, so the profit has to go to the community, not to the members, but the people who invest become members by virtue of each having one share, and so they all vote on the annual general meetings with one share. But it's not a workers' cooperative. They don't actually do anything. But they are allowed under tax laws to get a reasonable return on the amount they invested. So there's an example of a different way of starting up a cooperative now. There's infrastructure around to help you and to set you up your co-op rules. So these principles you saw on the wall of the co-op in the slide earlier, they're on the back of my business card, and I put them up because they're, I believe, what underlies our principles. And I won't go through them apart from this one, which is a spelling mistake because I've given you the wrong slideshow. And that's autonomy, not auto-many, autonomy. And the one, actually, the bullet point that puzzled me the most was members' economic participation. So if you go on the Co-ops UK site, you can see these principles expanded in more detail. But I think what we mean by that is we expect all our members to participate in the running of the business, in the management of the business, as well as doing their day job. Not everybody wants to do that, but they are strongly encouraged to do that. So finally, if this bunch of hairy hippies from the 1970s can start up a co-op, so can you. And my strapline is just go on to Co-ops UK and they help you do it. So thank you. There we are.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. It was a really enlightening and informative talk about the cooperative and Delta T. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, Tristan Norman from Simprens didn't arrive yet. He might come. Simprens are a very exciting new startup. They actually started in Cambridge University Entrepreneurs, and they won the challenge, which is called Ideas Take Flight. And they've secured more than 10 million pounds in their ideas. And they actually doing a lot of things with that money. And they developed, I think they'll come, but if they don't, I'll tell them more about myself. What? Tell more about them myself. So I want to introduce Elena Shompanova. She was a student here at Anglo-Ruskin University, and she founded the company called Apple Orchards, who does pastillas, Russians. So please welcome Elena. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Rinch has asked me to talk in a different slot because Tristan hasn't turned up. So while he's setting up, you've seen my stand. Oh, here we are. So to start off my talk, I'm just going to show you a little video that is going to give you an understanding of what we're doing. Звук будет у меня сейчас? Сейчас звук будет? Нет.
Heritage, stories, tastes, customs. Columna Pastilla, an apple orchard, is a sustainable social enterprise. We offer people experience of British and Russian intangible heritage, stories, tastes, customs and traditions in our Museum of Forgotten Taste. The feeling of happiness that people experience in our museum can then be taken away as a museum souvenir, a box of pastilla, a traditional Russian delicacy made of apples. We work to inspire dialogues between people and nations. We help to preserve the historic apple orchards by using the best British apples for our handmade gluten-free pastilla. We offer training and opportunities for young people with new jobs. We see our customer as a person who likes healthy, organic, tasty products that have a story behind them. Our customers are people interested in bringing traditions to life and preserving national heritage for the future generations. The profits of our business are reinvested back into the company for it to be able to realise its ambitious and socially important goals.
So, and now I'm just going to tell you a bit more from where it started and where we are now, and a little bit about our journey. Initially, the project started in the town of Kolomna, which is 100 kilometers away from Moscow. And the first mention of the town dates back to 1177. And you can see the beautiful Kremlin and the churches. There are lots of buildings going back to the 12th century. We do not have, unfortunately, like people have here, a national trust. So lots of heritage sites are decayed and ruined and not taken proper care of, sometimes just being pulled down for a shopping mall to be built there. So my colleagues have thought, well, how can we save this beautiful town and preserve the cultural heritage for the future generations? And to save the site, they realized they would have to put inside a building a project that would attract the community and the local authorities and the mass media. So they created a Museum of Forgotten Taste. What is a Museum of Forgotten Taste? We work with intangible cultural heritage, and that's something that you can touch, which UNESCO defined this, refers to this tastes or sounds, voices, customs, traditions, and it's very difficult to work with intangible cultural heritage because you can't touch it. That's why the idea of the Museum of Forgotten Taste has become so appealing. What my friends have done, if they researched the local literature of the town of Kolomna, and in one of the books of the writers, of the local writers, they found the mention of this apple sweet called pastilla, and also of a Kolomna pastilla lady, a character in a wonderful, she's a plump woman with red cheeks, and she's selling that pastilla at the Kolomna market, central market. So they got interested and they went to the regional museum and they found a recipe dating back to the 17th century of this medieval conserve, which was used by many families to preserve the excessive apple crop that they had. And it was so popular that lots of families would have it, and families like Fyodor Dostoevsky, the famous Russian writer, Leo Tolstoy, Catherine the Great, they would all have their own recipes. So they started working with the museums to discover those recipes and then make the product to those recipes. So they started off with the Museum of Forgotten Taste, and that was the first building. What they got a grant to rebuild it the way it was, and then they looked at the map of the town of Kolomna, and they said, we want to have this town as a museum. We want to rebuild all the heritage sites in the town, and they researched the history of each of the buildings, and they have a plan for over 100 years, a long-term strategy of how they could bring those projects to life. And they have been quite successful. They existed for 6 years. So the Museum of Forgotten Taste, I've told you already about it. They also opened a Kolomna pastilla making factory, rebuilding the 1852 house, which used to be a factory. And it's a living museum concept now. You can come there and you get immersed into the 19th century atmosphere. You can meet the merchant who used to own the factory and his household and wife. You can have a go at trying to make the product yourself. And then as you walk out again, you buy this box of pastilla as a museum souvenir, and the profits help us to get yet another project moving. We've set up a museum of bread. And you can see this is a traditional Russian kalach with a handle, kind of like your Cornish pastry, where people couldn't touch the bread with their dirty hands, so they would hold it to the handle and eat it like that. And the Museum of Coins is the fourth building that we've saved. It talks all about the 11th and 12th century coins found in the local area. And then the project was supported by British Council in Russia, and our friends in the British Council have been taking boxes of pastilla to their friends in the UK as a gift from Russia, as a souvenir. And then our British friends said, this is actually a very nice product. Would you like to try and maybe do something here in the UK with it? And one of the persons was head of visual arts, Sandra Rose, in the British Council here in London. And she said, I have a friend in Norfolk who has a pick your own orchard, and it's called Drove Orchards. Would you like to meet him? We said, of course we would. So we met, and he has lots of apple trees, and it's a pick your own orchard, as I said. There are lots of heritage apple varieties grown there. He traveled to Kolomna. He liked the enterprise. We shook hands a year and a half ago, and we set up this enterprise in the UK. We can work with any type of apple. It doesn't have to be perfect in shape, or we experiment with different flavors, so we can handle the excessive apple crop. And also what we started doing, we started making the products to the local Russian recipes, but we started researching the apple stories of the place where we are making them, and also the apple variety, the story of the apple variety. And so it brought us to set up a project called Apple Road. And it's a project that will bring and is bringing together communities from around the world when they want to share and preserve their heritage, orchard heritage and apple heritage. So we were inspired by Dostoevsky, who said that humanity will be cured and saved by an orchard. He said that 100 years ago, when the Industrial Revolution was in full swing and people were moving to the cities from the rural areas and were living in this world of chaos. And so he thought that for a human being to be better, it would be nice for them to have a piece of land, nice sky above them, and some peace and quiet. And so we're bringing together people who would want to share our philosophy. And with our enterprise, we help to preserve excessive apple crop, and we work with organizations who donate the apples to us, for instance, if they can't handle the crop. We also encourage farmers to restore or plant more heritage apple varieties. And it's actually a big problem here as well as in Russia. If you go to a supermarket, there's about 5 varieties on sale. Not all of them are from the UK. And it's the same kind of thing in Russia. And we keep on forgetting the tastes and the names of the apple varieties that our predecessors 200 years ago would have had. So we would like to bring this back by telling the stories of those apple varieties. We also help build stronger communities, because when we run tea ceremonies with our product, people have this nice feeling of sharing their favorite tastes and smells from the childhood, and the stories of a family recipe and how they used to make tea or an apple cake, and it all makes them closer together. And they also start telling us the story of how they grow apples in their own orchard, and we initiate community orchard across the country. So Apple Road started in Kolomna last year in September, and we had our friends from the Urban Orchard Project in London. They are a company who encourage people to grow their own fruit and veg in the urban environment. So they came to Kolomna and they started off a community orchard there. We don't have a culture of community orchard in Russia, so that we planted the first 3 British apple seedlings with them, and they ran a community orchard leader training. And then they ran games, traditional British games with apples for the Russian children. It was amazing. They also went, this huge tree trunk that you see here is from Darovoye estate, which is Fyodor Dostoevsky's dacha, kind of holiday home. And there's lots of apple trees there, which actually haven't been restored for a while because people just didn't have the expertise. So the Urban Orchard Project taught those people to restore the apple trees, and hopefully we'll be able to taste the apples that Fyodor Dostoevsky used to taste. We would then traveled to Norfolk. This is our mini production unit, the Apple machine, we call it, which is based in Thornham in Norfolk at the moment. And this is the first product that we created. It's called Drove House Pastilla. And Drove House is the house of the owners of Drove Orchards. It's the Jamesons family, and it's a watercolor from their family album, which shows the house in which they live now, how it used to be in the 18th century when it was first built as a house of local vicar to the villages. We then went to Southall, which is in Nottinghamshire, and it's a hometown of the Bromley apple. Now, who knows the story of the Bromley apple? Why is it called the Bromley? They don't know. So it's such a popular apple variety, and turns out it was many years ago in a small town in Nottinghamshire in Southall, a little girl was playing in the kitchen with the apple pips, and one of the pips fell into a pot, and an apple tree grew from it with these wonderful, huge green apples with a sharp taste. Several years later, a Mr. Bromley bought the house with the apple tree in the orchard, and he continued to take care of the apple tree. And then a local merchant called Mr. Merriweather came and said, you know, you have these wonderful apples. Would you mind if I sell them in the marketplace? And he said, no, of course I wouldn't, but you have to call them Bromleys. And there is a record in the Southall archive of the list of sales of the first Bromley apples in the marketplace, and that's how the name Bromleys came about. They now run a Bromley Apple Festival every year, and a descendant of Mr. Merriweather opens it, and there's a lot of Bromley apple trees who've been crafted from that original Bromley tree that grow in Southall, and the original apple tree is still there. You can come and see it, and it's protected by a sign, a special sign of the Royal Horticultural Society. And we also, in that town, with our friends from Norwood Park, who live there nearby, and they have a whole Bromley apple orchard crafted from the original apple tree. We planted a Russian apple tree, Antonovka, which is a very traditional Russian apple, similar in taste to the Bromleys. In Cambridge, we took part in Cambridge Botanic Garden Apple Day, and also in the Mill Road Winter Fair. And for this event, we created Cambridge Pastilla, which is made from Morley seedling. It's a Cambridge apple variety. And we were inspired by the story of Vladimir Nabokov, who studied here in Trinity College at the beginning of the 20th century. And he wrote a university poem in English, which you can find online. And it's read by Ralph Fiennes. It's a wonderful podcast if you want to read it and listen to it. And he wrote about his life in Cambridge as a student and as a person. And actually, when you read it, it's the same experience that I'm experiencing now, having moved from Russia here. But he was writing that at 5 o'clock, all the people would flock to the cafes and have loads of bright red cakes. So we were thinking, what are those bright red cakes? We were searching all the archives, we couldn't find it. So we just recreated a bright red cake with a strawberry icing on top of our pastilla. So now in the box like that, you can find the bright red cakes he was writing about. In London, we also run events, and we have our presence in London in the East India Company. And the East India Company was the company that brought tea to the UK and was the discoverer of tea to the world. It had a royal charter. It's a very old company. This is the tea master Lalith, who selected the teas to pair up with several of our pastilla varieties, and they now go as tea and pastilla treat in their shop in Mayfair that you can find. We've also created a special taste for them, which is pastilla with saffron and almonds that some of you probably have tasted, but please come and taste more. I have them at my stand. We also took part in the Slow Food Day in Italy, and we ran a Terra Madre Day here. And slow food is a movement kind of in opposition to the fast food movement. So it's about enjoying the food and cooking the right seasonal and ethical eating and the philosophy behind the food. So we're supporting that. And then we also run events in Shoreditch. There's a Layla's shop in Shoreditch and Calvert Avenue. If you're ever around there, I encourage you to visit. It's an organic shop and a cafe where they cook seasonal food, and it's absolutely wonderful So we run tea ceremonies where we tell people, we give them an experience of a Russian tea party, and then we tell the stories of where the product has come from and which taste they have. And then there is a performance that exposes different traditions to them. And then in return, we seek for contribution from them, and they tell us about their family traditions, inspiring cross-cultural dialogue. We now work, we've developed several, obviously we need the profit to keep us going, so we've developed several categories of products. One is called artisan inspiration, and that's the cakes for catering and tea shops. And actually this one, the bright pink one, you can find in the Espresso Library on East Road, which is just across the university. They just started selling them over the weekends. And this one is called Zephyr, which you wouldn't find really here, but it's kind of marshmallow, but much nicer. And they're all made of apples. We don't use any conservatives or preservatives. They are gluten-free as well. So for people who are wheat intolerant, that's really nice. Then another range is the Norfolk apple treat. So it's a healthy snack for every day. Again, it's mixed with berries or whisked with egg whites sometimes, and it's very healthy, rich in iron and vitamins. And then the Forgotten Taste collection is our product packaged in gift boxes, and each box tells the story of the product and the apple it's been made of. So where are we now? We have developed several points of sales in the UK. We have our mini production unit in Norfolk. We take part in the Apple Days and festivals, food festivals across the UK, which gives us an opportunity to test the market because it's a new product in the UK market. We found out a lot about the British palate and which tastes work better here, and also how people react to the stories. And what we found out that lots of our British friends were saying you should sell it as a product, forget about storytelling and your museum and all those things. And we just could see how different it is for a person when you tell the story and you explain that it's handmade, it's made from these apples, these are the ingredients, and this is the story behind the apple and the place where it's come from, than just putting it on the shelf and making lots of profit with mass production. All our products are handmade. The boxes are handmade by disabled people. We deliver them to their houses, and they can be assembled in their own peace and quiet. For some people, it's become, for some disabled people, especially in Russia, we don't have that many opportunities for disabled people. So for them, it's become like a social outing to go to work. They can dress up and put makeup on and go and make the boxes in the factory. We attract mass media coverage because people are interested in the stories, and we make a lot of contacts. We have people approaching us and offering us ways of cooperation that we probably never thought about. Where would we want to be in the future? Well, we would like to develop our project further and would like to work with different orchards in different countries, finding out more about different apple varieties and tastes. We also found Cambridge audience very receptive to what we are doing, and so we would like to set up a museum of forgotten apples taste here, where we would showcase the tastes from different countries and tell the stories of the apples. And we would like to continue to revive and preserve the tastes of the past for the future generations so that people appreciate their heritage. And then I would like to invite you on the 19th of April to St. Giles Church, which is here just across Kettle's Yard in Cambridge. And at 4 o'clock, it's going to be a tea party with Dostoevsky and his wife. It's going to be a theater performance, by the end of which you will find out about how Dostoevsky had a sweet tooth, why he wrote Crime and Punishment, and why he called his second wife my Golubchik Anya, which is a little form of endearment. So thank you very much for your attention. You may see the address of the website here, and also if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer. And if you have any ideas for us, we will also be more than happy to discuss. Thank you. Well, please do come and taste the products.
Hey guys, hello. We have live stream. I want to say hi.
And I realised that Oatly is quite fat active. One of the main issues I find is that I'm offering what you would get in business, or what I would get as a clinician. In business, as you go up the ladder, you start to get leadership training. And it's this combination of personal development techniques for you, in particular, that you need at that time, and professional skills. Students nowadays are under immense pressure. As you will know, you'll tell me. And the statistics are quite shocking, to be honest. So we know 29% of students experience clinical levels of depression. Female suicide went up by 50% in 5 years. I mean, it's really shocking. So I don't simply work with students who are struggling. I work with all students, mainly because we know that 80% of students who might be having any